Is a fief a number between 4 and 6? Is there a difference between knights and lords? If you pledge homage, must you also pledge fealty? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I am Professor Jerome Arkenberg, and I've been teaching a wide variety of history courses at colleges across this country for the past 30 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the difference between upper and lower nobility, or lords and knights, vassals, homage, and fealty, fiefs and allods, and liege lordship. At the end, I'll have the wrap-up quote on this video. But first, make sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, and that little bell thingy, so I can continue to bring you more great videos just like this one. Originally, in the Germanic tradition, a noble, quote-unquote, was both a free man and a warrior, which was the same thing among the Germans. But as they settled down in the ruins of the Roman Empire, those who could not afford weapons, armor, and a war horse became free peasants. But those who could afford these things became warriors or knights. During the early Middle Ages, Manorialism, which is about manors and serfs and things, emerged to support these knights as professional warriors, while vassalage developed to control the knights' predilection for violence. And both manorialism and vassalage played a critical role in shaping both the medieval and the modern state. The nobility, which was no more than 5% of the population at any one time, were at first divided simply into barons, essentially the king's buddies, and knights, common warriors. But by the later Middle Ages, the upper nobility has stratified themselves into a hierarchy, as seen here on this chart, a hierarchy of Grand Dukes and Archdukes and Dukes and Marquises and Marchesses and Markgrafs and Counts and Earls and Viscounts and Barons and Baronets, etc. The knights, too, by the end of the Middle Ages, had subdivided themselves into an upper ranking of knights holding, and the example I'm using here is of medieval England, holding land worth at least 20 pounds per year, which today would be laughable, but we'll put that down to inflation. But if your land brought in at least 20 pounds per year annual income, that would put you at the upper ranking of the knightly class. If you held land which brought in between 10 to 20 pounds per year, that would give you the middle ranking of an esquire. And finally, a lower ranking of gentry, holding land worth 5 to 10 pounds per year. Yes, with a mere 5-pound income per year, you would be in the lower ranks of the nobility. Now, the knight, while noble in the lower ranks of the nobility, was not equal to anyone in the upper nobility, in part because a turn of fortune could easily sink the knight back into the free peasantry, and in part because early knights were no more than thugs and gangbangers who terrorized the people they were supposed to be protecting. The knightly class, as a class, per se, began to form around the year 1200, when knights past fighting age, those who actually hadn't been killed and had gone past the age of about 30, got involved in local justice and administration. This gave them status, wealth, and influence. Though younger sons, those who would not inherit, and those who for some reason desired neither to be knights to fight, nor to pray to be clergy in some sense, turned more naturally to administration, law, and estate management. In early times, there was no code of chivalry, no courtly love, no rules of heraldry. But knights did possess the prerogative of violence, which was the legal right to kill, hurt, and maim on behalf of the peasants and clergy they were sworn to protect, though, of course, mostly they terrorized the people that in theory they were protecting. Still, knights were really not paragons of virtue, as often seen in medieval tales, the tales of King Arthur and his noble knights. Most knights fought more to acquire or defend land, to avenge perceived slights or disrespect, to prove their bravery or their strength, and sometimes simply because they could. When they fought, they were expected to fight bravely, and if taken prisoner, as seen in these two pictures here, unlike other kinds of soldiers, mostly filled out by the peasantry, they were normally held for ransom instead of being killed on the spot. Now, vassalage began with the Carolingians, that of Chuck the Hammer and Chuck the Great or Charlemagne. And by the way, the term vassal is a Celtic term, which essentially translates as boy. So it's a lord and his boys. This fuses the late Roman system of commandatio with a Germanic ideal of fellowship based on loyalty and honor, in return for which leaders were to share the wealth acquired from the spoils of war, which came to be known as a fief. Vassals then granted parts of their fiefs so their followers, that is, their warriors, could support themselves 24/7. For example, seen here the best way, the king grants land, keeps a good chunk of it for himself, but has to grant land for his various dukes and earls and barons. And they in turn will want to have those men to fight for them. So they grant parts of their lands, their fiefs, to their warriors. And then those guys do the same, up and down. So essentially, vassals breed vassals. The fief, which is not a number between 4 and 6, was to enable a knight to exist as a warrior 24/7 and not have to farm the land himself. In an age when wages, salaries, pensions, and currency were unknown or difficult to acquire. Now, a fief could actually be anything. Ideally, land. That's what everyone wanted, because land meant wealth. It's essentially the amount of food that you can get off the land to feed yourself and your family. A fief, though, could also be rents, which didn't have to be a monetary rent. Could be tolls on a road or a river. Could be an annual gift of a weapon. Let's say a sword +3 against wraiths. Or armor. A shield of +2 against orcs. Who knows? clothing could simply be a robe of silk or a robe of ermine, something. A heavy war horse every year, such as something. Jewelry, tithes, even the power to appoint priests or magistrates to office, which might sound like much, but those priests and magistrates would then have to pay you a fee to get appointed. Many fiefs were first given for the use of a particular knight to be returned upon death. But there is a natural human desire to pass on property to your own children, especially if you had held the property, the fief, for many years and had, perhaps in terms of land, actually improved it. So fiefs soon turned hereditary, with heirs paying a token fee to the lord for the right to enter into possession. This, if you think about it, often caused problems. What if the heir was incapable of fulfilling the duties for which the knight was given? In other words, to be a warrior. For example, this is the heir. He's 5, 6 years old, a toddler. He clearly is not going to be riding into battle. Or this is the heiress, the woman. Women were not allowed to be warriors. Not that women couldn't fight, they just weren't allowed to do so. Or what if the heir was a cleric, and the clerics by this point were not allowed to fight in battle, certainly not to wield any weapon which would cause blood. What if the heir was physically disabled, blind, deaf, missing a limb? Or was worse, an enemy of the Lord? This, for example, was a problem when the kings of England, who were Dukes of Normandy and Duke of Aquitaine, were vassals to the French king. And yet, what happens if, as King of England, they ally with the Holy Roman Empire to attack France, but as a vassal, they have to send their troops, their vassals in Normandy and Aquitaine, to help the French king against themselves? This is a real problem. This problem was never fully solved, but the emergence of a monetary economy, as described in another video, allowed lords to simply hire soldiers. And then came the idea of a Liege Lordship, which laid down priorities when vassals held fiefs from 2 or more lords who were inimical to each other or were actually at war with each other, or where they had conflicting obligations. Much like in modern times, we have, if you go bankrupt or your land's about to be seized because you didn't pay the mortgage, who gets it first? So you have rules. First creditor, second, third, fourth. First mortgage, second mortgage, third, fourth. Who gets the wealth first? Rules begin to be set up. This, at least, was the ideal in Western Europe. But in Eastern and Southern Europe, including the south of France, this ideal broke down, as their knights held land as an allode, that's A-L-L-O-D, an allode, which meant you held it freely. You were subject to no lord. You did not get it as part of being a vassal to another lord. It's yours, much like we regard land ownership today. Now, how did you get a fief? Well, this was you have to pledge your homage and fealty. Homage meaning, I will be your man, and fealty, I will be faithful to you. In other words, you give me this fief, and I'm not going to screw you by not showing up when you need me. This was done in a very public ceremony, heavily filled with symbolism, because as yet, when this first starts, this is an oral memorial society, where written documents were rare and not trusted, as described in another video. In many ways, it's like the original marriage ceremony. Even to this day, to be married, really, and some countries do this, all you got to do, you got the marriage contract, and both parties just have to sign it, and that's really good enough. But in an era before writing, before documents are trusted, they have the ceremony so that people can remember. Was there a priest present? Did they both vow to take you now? Did they say, I do, and not maybe? Was there wealth exchange? For example, a ring. Was there a party or reception afterwards? These are all mnemonic devices. So, if you want to get your fief, and the Lord is willing to give you one, how does the ceremony begin? First off, step 1. Keep in mind the different steps. Step 1, the vassal kneels before the Lord, granting the fief. As shown here, he's kneeling. This would be, in this case, he's getting a fief from, in this case, would be an heiress. Step 2, the Lord would ask the vassal, do you wish to become my man? That's the homage part. If so, step 3, the vassal was to respond, Volo, which is Latin for I wish it, or whatever the equivalent was in the local language. Step 4, the Lord then places his hands around those of the vassal. Kind of here? So this is the vassal. His hands are between those of the Lord. This is called Immixtio Manuum. Cor Immixtio, which is Latin for my hands are around your hands. This publicly signifies that I, the Lord, will protect you, and you submit because your hands are not around mine, but mine are allowed to be around yours. The next step, the vassal then arises. And since the ceremony where lords give lands to serfs was so far the same, so if you were a serf, you'd get your land exactly the same way. But to show that the vassal is not a serf, the lord and vassal give each other the kiss of peace on the mouth. No tongue, please. Which is symbolic of a contract between free men, not one betwixt lord and serf, as we see here. The next step, the Lord physically gives a symbol of the fief. It could be a stick, a knife, a clump of earth, maybe in a little bag of burlap or something. Some mnemonic device signifying the actual fief. Again, if the fief is a sword or armor, that is what the Lord will give you right at that point. But if it's land, something symbolic. So, and by the way, and if you get one of these, and Lord, in many of these noble families to this day, eventually there might be our charter, and then this original, the stick, a penknife, a clump of earth, will be attached to that charter as a symbol that, yes, we actually got that physical manifestation. Finally, the last part, the vassal has to physically take possession of the fief. So, for example, if I make you my vassal and give you all of Japan, if you want to get possession of Japan, you're going to have to go there. So it's not just, hey, I'm showing up and suddenly the serfs get message that you've taken possession, which would be more today. Back then, you had to physically ride there and claim possession, as many of the early explorers might have done, taking the flag and sticking it in the ground and claiming it. That is what you're doing. It's a physical open manifestation that this land from this point is yours. Now, in return for a fief, vassals agreed to perform various duties, which over time were increasingly regulated. The most important, of course, was to fight for their lords in war. When the lord is going to war, whether he is being summoned by his lord or he decides to go on a raid, you will accompany him and fight for him. Or if he's being attacked, you will show up and help defend him and his land. Secondly, you will help guard their lord's castles, strong points, towns, garrison duty. Thirdly, you will attend your lord's court and give advice when requested. And the court isn't simply showing up and having a big party, though there was part of that. Often it was deciding legal cases between freemen, not serfs. They could be peasants, but they had to be at least free. But more usually, if the king or the lord was involved, it was mostly of the same class. One knight versus another knight. Who owns Blackacre? Who owns Whiteacre? In this case, the court. And the court isn't the present-day jury of 12 and the whole ceremony. This is before there are legally established courts. The lord is sort of the judge. The jury will be all the vassals. If you want to see a read a great example of this, read the trial of Ganelon in the Song of Roland. Anyway, they would attend the lord's court and give advice and requests, and eventually this was demanded by vassals to control a lord's actions. After all, if a lord is going to war, a war which he will undoubtedly lose, or a very bad decision, or it's deciding to fight on instead of trying to make a deal. Remember, the vassals, they themselves, their lives are at risk, as is their property. And if they think the king is being foolish, they want no part of it. Or if the king is not governing correctly, or the lord is not governing correctly, or the lord is taking sides, Blackacre goes to all of his favorites, not where it should go, to these other special knights who are suing. So they begin. Essentially, this becomes the foundation for parliamentary democracy. Over the course of time, the amount of time knights were required to serve in war also became highly restricted to no more than 40 to 60 days per year, after which knights could leave the army regardless of the military situation, even if you were besieging an enemy strong point or a town, or, God forbid, you're in the middle of a frickin' battle, you could just leave. Or you would be paid cash for service beyond the allotted time. Essentially, you get overtime. Also, once that overtime kicks in, you, the vassal, only have to obey a direct order from his own lord. So if I, the king, have appointed General Friedrich, and General Friedrich is not your direct lord, you don't have to obey anything he says. Only for me. Of course, if I was wise, I would put you in the reserve right around me. Not every king was that wise. However, knights who failed to serve, didn't show up, didn't do anything, violated the fealty, did not fight for me, fought for somebody else, might have their fief confiscated. In bad cases, they might also have their lives confiscated. Looks like the Red Wedding. Anyway, the wrap-up quote. A vassal may not attack his lord without breaking the fealty of his homage, except perhaps in self-defense or when he goes by royal command with the king's army against his lord. He may not, without breach of fealty and homage, do anything which works to the disinheritance or bodily dishonor of his lord. If anyone has done several homages for different fees to different lords who are attacking each other, and his liege lord commands him to go personally with him against another of his lords, he must obey his liege lord in this matter, but saving to that other lord the service for the fief which he holds of him. If anyone does anything to the disinheritance of his lord, his heirs shall by law lose the fief which he holds of him. The same rule will apply if anyone lays violent hands on his lord to hurt him or do him a dreadful injury. Ranulph de Glanville, 1180. Let me know what you think of this quote in the comment section below. Also, what you liked about this video, and what other historical topics or subjects you'd like to see in future videos. Be sure to click like, share, and subscribe, as it will help me bring you more great videos, and click on that little bell thingy so you'll know when the next History Waits for No One video is posted. If you want to know more, there are recommended studies on this topic in the description below, along with other ways to connect with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.